Welcome back to From the Bridge. I'm your host, guide, and captain to discoveries along the event marketing seas. Speaking of seas, today's show is all about C words. That's words that begin with the letter C. Namely, the 6 essential C words you must master in winning new business. And my special guest, Chappel McCollister of music talent agency Paradigm, will be here to talk about one of the most important yet most underutilized C words, collaboration. We'll jump back up on the soapbox with a couple of other C words and finally travel out again on the road with Rick. So since we're talking C words, let's all cast off. If you've heard me speak, you know that I talk a lot about learning from failure. I don't think you learn anything from success. I think success just makes you fat and happy and usually stupid. But you learn a lot from failure. And if you've listened to the podcast, you know I like to quote from the Gospel of Jimmy Buffett a lot. And obviously his signature song, Margaritaville, tells a great story that starts out at, well, it's nobody's fault. And then it could be my fault. And then finally the realization is it's my own damn fault. Well, let me talk about my own damn fault. We recently were part of a new business pitch. This is kind of rare for us. As an agency, we don't do a lot of RFPs. In fact, it's been kind of interesting. Over 17 years, this was only the 4th one we'd done in 17 years, and only the 2nd one we'd done by ourselves. We had done 2 in collaboration with some other folks. Now, I had an amazing track record back in the 1990s of winning RFPs. I had an agency that went 3 for 3 with 3 big wins. We won the Goodwill Games business, we won the MasterCard World Cup business, and we won the Sara Lee Olympic business, and that created a situation where Advantage International bought us. And during that period, Advantage went 16 out of 18 pitches, which is staggering to think about that. And so we pitched, or we answered this RFP, and not only did we not win, we didn't even get to the beauty pageant. We didn't even get invited to present. And it made me think, and that led me to the first C word of the day, which is contemplation. You know, the first thing you do when you lose, you need to sit down and think about, okay, you know, what went wrong. And for me, contemplation leads always to my second C word, and that word is clarity. Clarity allows me to realize what went wrong, and then it allows me to try to figure out what I need to do about it. And what I realized was that I had failed to follow my 6 C words for winning new business. And I have found that when I'm in a slump, it's usually somewhere in the system. I get lazy, I get sloppy, I get cocky. That's another C word. I get shortcutting. That's what happens. Well, in this case, we did, and it cost us. So today I'm going to try to help you all out there. I'm going to talk about the C words for winning new business, and they are in this order. The first thing is competency. See, you need to show the particular brand that has reached out to you that you have the expertise they need to do the job they want. Now, this is where we sometimes, again, we think too much about us. We give them all sorts of competencies when they really only wanted one. It's kind of like a chef who answers the brief to make Mexican street tacos, and he leads with the fact that he's a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. It might have been better to lead that he worked in Mexico City on the street. Competency, though, has to be demonstrated before you can move to the next word, and the next word is context. And this is a critical word. This is where you're going to articulate the experience that you have, but only the experience that's needed. Again, you want to show the context to show that you've done something similarly. Okay, so I know this. In this particular RFP, we pounded them, and I mean pounded them with our experience. And guess what? It really didn't matter because we did not identify the context of why that experience meant for them. Then we go to what I think is clearly the most important C word of all, and one we did not do at all this time. And that word is challenge. See, here's what I know. You're not hired to tell them what they know. You're hired to tell them what they don't know. You're hired to tell them some insights they haven't thought about. You're there to challenge their thinking. Now, sadly, we had a big idea to challenge their thinking, and we screwed up and didn't put it in the RFP. We were so arrogant that we saved it for the pitch. Well, we never got to the pitch, so it's our own fault. But clearly this, if you want to win business, you don't win business by having better relationships with people. You win business by challenging the way they think, because that's how you begin to present yourself as being unique, which leads us to the fourth word, which is creativity. And this is where you're going to give them a solution to the challenge that you've just identified. And oh, by the way, you hope that you're the only solution to that particular challenge. Now, this is a little dangerous because this is a dance. Now, I like to dance a lot, but I really like to dance with my wife because she covers up all my mistakes. She anticipates what I'm going to do before I do it. Now, when you dance with someone you've never danced with, it's a little awkward. And this is where we are in the pitch. You don't know these people very well, and you're giving them a dance. And part of the problem is this. A lot of clients, and in this case, this client wanted a solution. I believe that's dangerous, and here's why. I can come in and paint a picture of what I think your sponsorship should look like, but that's my picture. That's not your picture. And so I think we've got to be in a position to show enough ideas to be dangerous, but not enough to have painted the picture for them. Which leads me to my fifth C word, which is collaboration. I kind of look back over the years, and I've seen a whole lot of good sponsorships, but unfortunately very few great sponsorships. And I think it's because there was not a collaborative effort. When I talked about painting a picture, I talk often about what we call paint by numbers. Remember paint by numbers, where you gave them the outline and you had little numbers in there, and that was a color red or the color blue, and you painted it yourselves. Well, here's what I know about sponsorship programs. You can come pitch the most creative thing at all, but then guess what? Real life gets in the way. Real life gets in the way of big ideas. Oh, we're not legally allowed to do that. Or no, we can't fund that. Or no, I can't get my sales force behind that. No. And this is where collaboration becomes so essential in the new business process. I mentioned MasterCard when we won the MasterCard World Cup business. I look back historically, that was the best client I ever had. Client, that's another C word. And I think clients make great agencies and not the other way around. MasterCard was a great client, but they had even better processes. They were very collaborative in the nature of the sponsorship. I remember our first World Cup internal organizing committee had about 8 people, and by the time we finished, it had over 200 people. That's how you build collaboration. And finally, it leads me to the last C word, and this is pretty essential too, and that's chemistry. Do we like each other? Do we want to socialize? I like to think, is this somebody I want to take fishing, or somebody I want to cook for, or better yet, do both? And candidly, if the answer's no at my age, then I need to run for the hills, because chemistry is such an essential thing. The 6 C's to winning business. Well, we failed to do this. And in the words of Jimmy Buffett, it's my own damn fault. Now, after my contemplation and my clarity, am I happy about getting my ass kicked? That would be a big no. The day I'm okay with getting my ass kicked is the day I need to get out of the business. But here's the good news. This was a wake-up call for me and for our team. We needed to remind ourselves to do what we do because there's bigger game ahead, and we're now locked and loaded. Speaking of the elusive word collaboration, my guest, Chappel McCollister, does just that each and every day. Chappel is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Paradigm, based in Nashville. Paradigm is a leading music talent agency representing some of the biggest artists in country music, and Chappel works with all of these musical clients across a range of areas, including brand and corporate partnerships, premium VIP experiences, product licensing, strategic investments, and other activities. Let's welcome Chappel to the bridge. Hey, Chappel, we're glad you're with us today.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I'm excited.
Well, you live in Music City. You work in the music business. I want to go back to the beginning. Were you always a music guy? Where'd you start, and how'd you get into the business?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I grew up necessarily in like a music family. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. My introduction to music was probably like a lot of kids from older siblings. And I went in high school, I moved to Birmingham, Alabama. And then really all I did was I ran track, and I ran my freshman year. I went to University of North Carolina in Charlotte, ran track for them, and my whole world was running. And after my freshman year, I transferred to Auburn and decided to give up running and started booking bands for Auburn University, for all the university-funded entertainment. Like a lot of the big public schools, they had a budget every year to bring in entertainment for the students, and some of that budget went to speakers and comedians, but I focused on the music side. So they let me book one big show every semester, and that got me hooked on not only music, but like the music industry. I did that for 3 years while I was at Auburn.
You remember some of the bands you booked?
Yeah, I booked OAR. I booked Ben Harper. I booked Citizen Cope.
Wow, that's really cool.
We had to change. The funny thing was, it taught me, because every semester we had to change genres to focus on a different kind of subset of the university population. So one semester I needed to do a hip hop band. One semester I needed to do rock. One semester I needed to do country. So it kind of helped me understand that I wasn't just booking for myself and what I liked, that I had a whole kind of market to understand. And so that, I started doing little polls across the university to see what people were listening to. It was before there was Spotify. It was Facebook was fairly new, so it was hard to pull that data. So it taught me a little bit more about market research, I guess, in a very simple way. And during that time,
the whole music industry revolves around L.A., doesn't it, Lower Alabama? So
yeah, exactly. It's a thriving metropolis of music. No, it was really fun. And during the summers at Auburn, I would go work for a music festival in Alabama that's no longer around, called Birmingham City Stages. And that was probably the largest music entity in that area. And then I also worked at a small club called Workplay in Birmingham. And it was a free internship. And so to make money, I would do load in, load outs. So I was a local stagehand, and they'd pay me $50 per show. And so that taught me more about the live side and more about the crew and a little bit of the quote unquote touring side, even though I was just working for one venue. So at that point I was pretty hooked, and it was just such a fascinating kind of beast. And there's a lot of things to learn. And I was fortunate when I graduated, My degree was in marketing, and I got a job with, at the time, the company was called George P. Johnson, which is one of the largest automotive experiential.
Yep.
If you were to go to the Detroit Auto Show, George P. Johnson has about 70% of those clients. And they had recently one of their big clients was Chrysler Fiat, and they'd recently done a partnership with Tim McGraw and Faith Hill and Jeep. And that kind of got them into the music world. And so they were trying to see if that was a viable outlet for their business, a viable kind of stream of revenue. So they were building a small team in Nashville to focus on what we now call tour sponsorships, and leverage the experiential marketing in a live music tour instead of just focusing on a one-off event like a festival or even an auto show. So they brought me in to go on the road and be and manage the partnership from the road. So there would be people in the office that had sold the partnership and had agreed upon all these sponsorship deliverables, but they needed somebody, to set up the gear and make sure that when executives came to shows, they were taken care of with tickets and meet and greets, whatever was agreed upon. So they were looking for someone who was young, didn't need a lot of sleep, and could do this night after night for an extended period of time. And I was willing and able, and I was right out of college, following a recession. So I was taking whatever was given to me. So I went on the road, represented a brand called Country Financial. It's kind of a middle America insurance company. And they had done a deal with Jason Aldean, who at the time I didn't listen to a lot of country at the time, so I didn't know who Jason Aldean was. I remember my interview pretending like I knew all about him, and went immediately to
fake
Google
it till you make
afterwards.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
That's right.
So I went on tour with Jason Aldean, representing Country Financial, and then also they had done a separate deal with Jewel, a different tour. So I would hop between the Jason tour and the Jewel tour, which was very different experience. And that got me, that really kind of immersed me into the live side, gave me a lot of respect for road crews, production managers, all the work that goes into a show before a fan gets there.
Yeah, the complexity of the music industry is pretty staggering. And we're going to talk a little bit later about COVID, but all those people are without jobs right now. And that's just heartbreaking. I think people don't understand the trickle down of the music industry. And you got to see firsthand almost every facet of a live industry. And so that had to be great training to understand you got to navigate that effectively on behalf of both parts of the sponsorship, the sponsor and the music artist.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I was learning how to speak two different languages. I would have one conversation with the CMO of Country Financial, and then I would turn around and be communicating something to a production manager who highly skilled at what they do, have done, thousands of shows in their life, but have a different method of communication. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes I wouldn't necessarily put the CMO and the production manager in the same room. I was kind of a filter of that communication so that we could get stuff done. And I think that helped set me up, because a lot of what I do now, speaking between brands and artists, they do speak two different languages. So at times I would consider myself somewhat of a translator. Because, whether it's egos or timing or cadence, they're on two different schedules, but still both highly qualified and highly intelligent in what they do. So it was a great experience. I did that for about 12, 18 months, and then that company, George P. Johnson, decided to bring me on full time. And we ended up spinning that off into a side agency that was owned by George P. Johnson. But we decided to brand ourselves to get a little differentiator in the market mix, which was G7 Entertainment Marketing. And ultimately, I came off the road into the office and started managing those tour sponsorships and selling those tour sponsorships from the office, and that taught me how to pitch. We also expanded. I ran that department for about 6 years. We did international tours. We did represented CoverGirl for several years and did all of their Taylor Swift activation and Pink activation. Did their NFL activation as well, and then kept the relationship with the Taylor team and started working on a lot of her tour sponsors, from Sony to Elizabeth Arden to Keds to Diet Coke, so that we got in a good rhythm with that team as well as her brand partners. Did a big U2 Salesforce tour that got me a lot of experience in Europe, Australia, New Zealand. So really kind of expanded my world into an international standpoint, from arenas and stadiums, talent focus. But the biggest piece there, I think it taught me how to pitch, and kind of I think everyone's got a different style of selling, a different style of pitching, and I kind of got into a good rhythm. And then after almost 6.5 years at G7, I moved to artist management, a boutique artist management company in Nashville called Soapbox Entertainment. And we represented, I'd worked with pop a lot at G7, but Soapbox was pretty much exclusively country. And represented Faith Hill and Casey Musgraves, Kelsey Ballerini, Dan and Shay, Johnny Cash Estate, as well as several others. So I had a roster of about 10 to 12 artists, but I was able to really know everything they were doing. So it helped me pitch and talk about what kind of strategic partnerships made sense, because I had access to everything they were doing, all the information. And so I was there for about 3.5 years. We did some really, really fun stuff. We did a documentary on Tim and Faith called Soul to Soul around their kind of reunion Soul to Soul tour, 2017 and 18. I got to launch a wine brand for Little Big Town called Four Cellars, and then ultimately that spun off into a second brand called Day Drinking, which was a really fun project and taught me a lot about how to create a brand from scratch. How to work with a partner that's not just a 12-month relationship. This was going to be an evergreen project and something that the band had a lot of sweat equity in. And when it has success, they have success. So it's a very much a different relationship than here are the deliverables and here's your guarantee.
What's interesting about the collaboration process, I think the artist really has to understand too. You talked about Taylor Swift. I'll tell you a quick Taylor Swift story. We were involved with a project with an agency called AIM Marketing Solutions. A friend of mine, the late Christy Atkins, had created this agency, and she created a program in Nashville called Sound and Speed that was the intersection of NASCAR and country music, and it benefited both the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Victory Junction Gang camp in Randleman, North Carolina, that had been set up by Kyle Petty when his son Adam was killed, for children that had disabilities. And a leading SunTrust executive was a guy named Brian Williams in Nashville, and Brian was tragically killed in a boating accident. And the year after that, we put on Sound and Speed, and Alan Jackson was our headliner. Brian had banked Alan when he first came to Nashville, and he felt like he wanted to say goodbye to his friend by doing this event. Well, it was a great concert at Bridgestone, but there was a young girl named Taylor Swift who opened that concert. And I'd never seen so many little girls in my life that were there. And she finished her set and said, "And I want to meet all y'all. And I'll be in the concourse next to this pink Ford truck, and I'll sign autographs." Well, we had to pay an extra day of rent because she signed autographs till 3:00 in the morning.
Yep.
And my wife left there saying, I know she's talented, but she's got something else. She's got grit, and she gets it. And it was just a great story. She was very young at that time to watch her understand her fan. It was really kind of neat to just watch it, just to watch it. And the uncanny thing I remember about her was every little girl that came up to get an autograph, she was intentional about that was the most important conversation she was having that day.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen very few people that can do that. You know, so many people are usually looking around the room for, you know, who else do I need to talk to? And she just had a knack. So I guess you did some great partnerships for her, but I think it starts with the artist, doesn't it?
100%. You know, no one knows fan engagement better than she does, and I think there's a lot of artists that kind of followed suit from that. Certainly, as we are in a social media age, for sure, and that engagement is live and also engagement on socials. You know, there's a lot of artists that will respond directly to all the direct messages they get on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But it's really cool to see it also on the live side when they can spend some time with fans and but as far as, you know, to your original question about collaboration, an idea or a brand that a artist is passionate about, it makes all the difference. You know, I think consumers and fans are smarter than they've ever been before. And so
they can smell the phony.
They can smell the phony.
Yeah.
They can see through it. They can see through, you know, a paid for post situation on Instagram or whatever the platform may be. So I think that it makes all the difference if there's an authentic brand story, if there is a natural connection or general passion between that artist and the brand, or if there's an idea that an artist has that says, hey, I really want to do this. It's going to add value to my fans. It's going to add value to my album release, my tour, whatever it may be. You know, you take that nugget, sometimes you're finding the right partner that fits that. So I think that makes a big difference in our world.
Well, not only do you collaborate with the artist, I found the music industry to be extremely complex. We've been talking about C words today, and the complexity of the music industry between an artist having an agent, a manager, a booking agent, a publicist, a publisher. I mean, it's complicated.
It doesn't get more complicated. It is complicated, you know. Us in the partnership world and the strategic partnership space in music, you know, we compete not just against other artists or other brands, but also we compete against all aspects of the entertainment industry, specifically sports, for sure. And when, you know, I always envy sports because, one, you know, from a dollar standpoint, sports is substantially higher than music in the sponsorship space. But the simplicity, I envy the simplicity of it. From a structure standpoint, you know, if you want to partner with an athlete, there's one route. If you want to partner with a league, there's a route. If you partner, you know, it's pretty clean, as opposed to music, which is highly fragmented, from a label standpoint, from an ownership of rights, from a decision maker, gatekeeper, whatever you want to call it. So a lot of times it's me helping educate buyers or helping educate brands on how to navigate the space in general.
And do you find yourself doing the same on the other side? I mean, do you have to, you know, you work with a lot of artists, and do you have to educate in some cases the artist and their management teams too?
Definitely have to educate them depending on their level of experience in the brand space. I think a big piece that's tricky is artists, they put out their art, and when it's finished, obviously there's a plan of how to release the music, but sometimes that plan is 2, 3, 4 month lead times, and they're like, you know, there's a window that makes the album's done. Let's go ahead and release it, and the notice can be a matter of weeks or just a couple of months, as opposed to brands. Oftentimes, as you know,
Yeah.
they could be planning 12, 24 months ahead. So it's really, sometimes timing is the biggest obstacle. I might have an artist come and say, "Hey, I really love this brand, what they're doing. I want to get on this campaign that they're doing. I want to partner with them on the album release that's coming up next month." And that conversation is a tough one with the brand, because they probably planned that campaign, or they probably have spent their dollars maybe 18 months before. So a lot of it is educating the artists and artist teams on kind of what this long game is, how to build these relationships. Every once in a while you get lightning in a bottle where the budget's there, the timing's there on the brand side, and the artist is excited and it's go. But that's not the norm in my experience. So sometimes as we talk to brands, I always try to encourage, whether you call it a slush fund or whether you call it whatever you want to call it, but to allocate some money, if you're wanting to spend in the music space, is to allocate some money that is not planned 12 or 24 months ahead, but it allows you a little bit of agility when opportunities come up. Because sometimes those opportunities, sometimes you have an artist that has a nonprofit or charitable component, and there's a event they're going to throw, and it's going to be a great look. Maybe it gets TV pickup, maybe it gets a lot of press pickup, whatever it may be. But that comes together in a matter of weeks. And if a brand is there and has the ability to partner with that, it can be a really great thing.
I really agree with that. I've spent my entire career on the agency side, so I've never been on the corporate side. I've worked with probably 200 Fortune 500 companies in my career, but that's great advice to say, if you had a slush or an opportunistic fund, you're going to get so much more value from that, because when that big opportunity comes, if you just have a little bit of dollars to spend, you can get huge return on that. And yet they don't do it. They just, and I don't know if there's a fear
factor. They're dealing with finance departments.
Yeah.
They're dealing with a lot of legal departments, whatever it may be. And I get it. We've all got kind of our obstacles internally. But I think, and I hope, it'd be interesting with COVID, because COVID may, on the brand side, COVID may require these brands to be more agile, because obviously they're trying to reshuffle, even in the music space, but outside of that, they're reshuffling marketing campaigns. They're reshuffling a lot of dollars very quickly. And that may be a trend and I hope it's a trend that occurs, or at least there's a percentage of those funds that can be allocated to more agile initiatives. But it'll be interesting to see. We're not going to know that until we get on the other side.
Well, we've had lots of C words today, COVID being one. Winston Churchill once said, "Never waste a crisis," another C word. This is clearly a crisis. What have y'all had to do? What have you had to do to pivot? An artist has got an album dropping and they can't tour anymore, or they've got they've lost a tour, or they've got band members that they're trying to help feed. Talk about the musical pivot that's had to happen. Yeah,
it's really all over the board. It's so interesting to see. So at Paradigm, we represent about 2,800 different artists, and so I get to see artists of all different genres, different places in their career, and how they're reacting to this. But as far as some broad strokes, touring revenue has come to a complete halt. And depending on the genre, depending on the artist, but you're talking about somewhere between 70 and 80% of an artist's revenue just completely at a halt. Some artists have saved up for a rainy day, and it's certainly raining. And some haven't. And so depending on those scenarios, it depends on what an artist is willing to want to do or engage in for additional revenue. The ones they're in a good place, I find that they're not reducing their numbers for partnerships or outside opportunities. They're pretty much, I'm going to sit and weather the storm. I'm in a good place, in hopes that next year we come back to a degree, and then 2022 we're back at full tilt. a lot of artists are not in those positions. So me kind of overseeing some strategic partnerships, which can be anything from book deals to podcast opportunities to brand partnerships, which is a lot of what I do. My phone's been ringing a lot, as you can imagine. The brand space has continued to stay active, but certainly not at the pre-COVID dollars. So with that, I'm getting offers for artists at a 50, maybe even 25% of what I would normally get, and I'm absolutely presenting those offers because I don't know where some of these artists. Every artist is in a different scenario, so I'm making sure that they're seeing all the opportunities come by. Trying to identify brands that are spending money in the space, whether it's with virtual experiences or digital content or whatever it may be. So the pivot, the pivot, and I think what will come from this time on the artist side, I think it's going to, I think the artists will look more at strategic partnerships, whether it's brand or any sort of brand extension. So I think you'll see artists looking more at maybe creating lifestyle brands that take a little time to get going, but can produce, mailbox money and some revenue for them long term. I think they'll be more open to brand opportunities, assuming it's the right fit for them. I think once it'll be really interesting in 5 years to look back and see what has it really affected in the music space. Are we back?
We all want 2020 hindsight.
Yes, I very much look forward to 2020 hindsight because I think there's a bit of a scramble. I think we're going to be the last ones to come back in regards to large scale. I think sports, and even sports right now you're seeing stuff change by the week. I'm sure you're seeing.
No, I'm seeing it change by the hour. I mean,
yeah.
It used to be my idea long-term playing, and COVID was tomorrow. And now it's like an hour from now. It's every day there's a bombshell, and
right.
Yeah, and I know y'all are seeing it too.
Yeah, and the less sports play, the worse it is for us. So. You take NHL and NBA out of it because they're in a bubble, and we can't be in a bubble like they are. But when you look at college football, that's conference by conference starting to push to spring or reduce their season or make conference only play, no fans, that kind of stuff. And you look at NFL, which still is trying to figure out what they're doing. I don't know. I was hopeful that we would see some large scale sporting events this fall, but I think I'll believe it when I see it. But that's going to delay everything for us because a big difference between, well, there's a lot of differences obviously between sports and music events, but a big piece of it is in music, there's a person or a band to point the finger at. Even when you look at scalping, anything negative associated with the large music event, there is one individual person or band that a fan can say, you did this, whether they're right or wrong. I paid $400 for a ticket to XYZ show. Well, they don't say that they paid that on the secondary market and they missed the original pre-sale or they missed the original on sale.
Blame the band.
They blame the band.
Yeah.
But when that happens when it happens at a Lakers game, they don't point the finger at LeBron James or the coach, or even the organization has the ability to kind of slough that off.
Yeah,
it's
deflect.
More of, deflect, right? And so with that, we're under a high amount of what I would consider kind of fan scrutiny. We're under a magnifying glass a lot more. And as we get into post-COVID shows, we have to remember that because as you've seen with certain artists that have tried to come back too early and just gotten completely destroyed from a PR standpoint, we have to consider our fans' health and safety as we do our band and crew and everybody associated with the tour. But even, in addition to that, there's a really high PR magnifying glass under those artists. And so they've got to be, that's why I think they'll definitely be the last to come back. And so we're obviously hopeful that 2021, we can have shows, and whether it's Q2, Q3, whenever it is. But we got to turn the faucet back on at some point on live shows, but also being very cautious of fan safety and crew safety.
Yeah, I'm just not sure it'll happen without a vaccine or
Yeah.
without some sort of real significant treatment. You know, the
Yep.
music experience is, in my opinion, the concert experience is so intimate. You know,
Yeah.
you may be, and it's intimate even with a stadium show. I mean,
Yep.
it's a collective experience that you're sharing, and you know, like you said, it's not a made for television event. You know, the NFL can get by even with
Yeah.
nobody in the stands. We're going to stay home and watch games. I mean, I'm watching NASCAR with nobody in the stands, and it's still compelling. I'm not going to watch an artist play an empty. You lose the intimacy. You lose the
Right.
whole kind of deal, and that's really hard. And the other thing I'm really concerned about, and it's heartbreaking. Again, I'm 66 years old. I'm looking at so many young people that have missed out on graduations and proms and weddings and you know all those kinds of things. Well, I think about young musicians that really you know came up through the grassroots. You're building a following club by club, and all those clubs are
Yeah.
closed right now. And so, I think you're going to see what I call a gap. We're going to miss out on, I think, some maybe talented young people that have not had the opportunity for that kind of exposure. And that's a real tragedy too. You know, we think of the big artists, but you know, the music industry consistently refuels itself with new emerging talent, and there's
Yeah.
no place for them to play right now. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're gonna, a whole different conversation, but we're gonna have to take care of our small venues. I think when the industry comes back, it'll start from clubs into theaters, into amphitheaters, into arenas, and into stadiums. But we have to, we got to keep the clubs and the club owners open, so that those artists have venues to play. Because even when we come back, if those venues aren't there, there's going to be a lot of barriers to entry. But yeah, absolutely. I
And I
think
hope
there's a lot of,
some big artists will support you in that. I've told this story before. I think I was either a senior in high school I think I was a senior in high school, or maybe I was a freshman in college. There was a little club in Atlanta called the Great Southeast Music Hall in Broadview Plaza. That was the first place I ever saw Jimmy Buffett. And anyway, it was, you know, at that time, Georgia was an 18-year-old state. You could buy beer at 18. And my little brother, who was not 18, knew that he could go with me and drink beer. So, because you'd get a bucket of beer, nobody bothered you. And so we showed up one night to drink beer. We had no idea who the artist was. Well, the artist was a band called the Rolling Thunder Review Band. Okay, Rolling Thunder Review Band. I had no idea. I mean, but you know, we're there to drink beer and to hang out and have a good time. So the 7 o'clock show, and out comes the Rolling Thunder Review Band. Bob Dylan, Roger McGuinn, Joan Baez. I'm trying to think of who the fourth one was. I was like, go pee now, because we're not leaving our seat for the 10 o'clock show either. I mean,
yeah,
and they had played these small clubs kind of incognito that year. Well, let me tell you, the 7 o'clock show, there wasn't anybody. And again, this is pre-cell phone, but somebody wore out the payphone, you know, and by the 10 o'clock show, you couldn't move. I didn't care. I was on the front row. And I would like to see some big artists kind of help bring the small clubs back. You think that could happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's all going to be tied to an artist's story, because those clubs are a part of those artists' DNA. Very few artists jump from first album into arenas and stadiums. There's oftentimes, and even more so now than even 20 years ago, but they're slugging it out in the clubs, and sometimes even the fraternities, and then the clubs, and then the theaters. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see it localized, where an artist from Nashville has a tie to the Basement, or has a tie to Exit In. So many great bands came out of Athens, Georgia, with some of the great venues there. So I think what you'll see as the industry comes back, you'll see kind of localized support from artists and the venues that were a part of their story.
I'm a big fan of a place in Texas called Green Hall. It's the oldest continuously operating honky tonk in Texas. I think 1850. Yeah, wonderful place. And of course, there was a story. There was a student at San Marcos, now Texas State University, and he played in the house band at Green Hall like 2 nights a week when there were no headliners. And one day he told the lady that ran the place he was going to Nashville to do a demo. That guy was George Strait. And historically George has always come back and played at Green Hall. Which is kind of cool. You don't forget where you came from, and I'm hoping that's going to happen. We've kind of touched on this, but let's close with this. What are we going to learn from this, and what's ahead for the music industry that you think is going to be a good thing?
It's a great question. I think what we're going to learn is that, before in the music industry, I think people prepared for recessions and how to get through those time periods when people might not be paying $100 for a ticket, but they might be paying $50 for a ticket. I don't think we ever prepared for the faucet to be turned completely off. So I think from the business manager side, I think it'll completely restructure how aggressive the industry is financially, both on the personal finances and on the LLC side for artists. I think when we come back, I think you'll see artists, maybe the production changes, at least in the first year or two, where it's not, we got to a point where every show had pyro and every show had huge video screens and stages that moved and B stages and all this stuff. I think we might see that reel back a little bit, and the larger scale shows could focus more just on the music and bringing it back to that place, at least in the short term. It might be maybe something that continues past that.
Yeah, I think fans will be ready for that, even that level of simplicity. They just want to be back together. I told somebody the other day, I think the event marketing industry, sport, entertainment, I think it's like a giant champagne bottle. It's on ice. When we pop it, it's going to pop. It's going to pour like crazy. We just don't know when we can pop the cork, and that's the frustration.
Yeah, agreed. I think from the festival side, there's going to be some stuff that doesn't make it through. I think it's going to be consumers are going to come back, and they're going to want to go to a bunch of stuff. But we also may be in somewhat of a, financial, depending on how the next few months go, we might be in a whole different place financially, where fans are going to be very selective as to what they're going to. They may only go to 1 or 2 shows next year if they go to a show. So, I think we're going to have to be really deliberate in what we do from the live side. And I think, I think fans, I think artists are going to be more open to the stuff that I do over at Paradigm, whether it's looking into books and book offers, looking into partnership offers, as we mentioned earlier, building a brand themselves and finding what I call white space, which is areas in the marketplace that are not cluttered. Like, beauty space has a lot of celebrity endorsements, but there are other aspects and there are other product lines and categories that might not be as cluttered. And so finding that white space and seeing if there's opportunity there. Stuff that takes a lot longer lead time, but can also be good kind of mailbox money, good long-term business initiatives that an artist can contribute to.
Well, we've spent all our time today talking about C words, and I guess the C word that kind of sums up the whole place where we are is the word challenging. But we got to still do our jobs. I'm reminding every brand I talk to, no one ever saved themselves back to prosperity. You're going to have to spend appropriately and effectively, and I'm sure that's the same kind of conversations you're having with brands.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's so interesting because, like, I spoke to a brand the other day, and their stock is at an all-time high, but they have cut their entertainment dollars by 40%. And that was fascinating to me. I think brands are while they may be, some brands may be doing fine, they are preparing for a storm ahead from a financial standpoint.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But I think a lot of, unfortunately, when times get hard, and that can look a lot of different ways, but the unfortunately, marketing dollars get cut typically. It's like a formula they use. And to your point, I feel that, to me, it's a time to really get smart with your marketing dollars, and music or sports might not be the best route for a brand, but for a brand that is actively playing in that, to me, it's a time to, maybe not double down, but get aggressive in that space. There's going to be some great opportunities in the space. It's going to take a while for everything to level out. I think there's going to be some opportunities at dollar amounts that will be a steal for a brand, and I think it's a time to get aggressive. But that's a conversation that's always tough to have with the brand, because they've got, like we said earlier, they've got a lot of internal obstacles to kind of overcome.
Well, it is a challenging time. It is a complex time, but I know you're going to be up to the challenge. You've had a great career so far, but I know this, you're just getting started, and it's going to be fun to kind of watch coming out of this, what you do, what Paradigm does, what your artists do. And I can't thank you enough, pal, for sharing some of your insights and expertise to us today from the bridge.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Rick.
Let's jump back up on that soapbox and talk about yet another C word: compromise. As of this recording, Congress has still failed to pass anything to help people suffering from this pandemic. Now, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I know you cannot just keep printing money, but we have to do something. People are hurting. People can't pay their rent. People can't feed their children. Both sides of the aisle need to give on some things. The American people, yes, those same people who actually pay the salaries of all persons in Congress, now need a return on that investment. We need to compromise. Even rivals can compromise. I recently finished a book, a biography on Frank Bannock. Frank Bannock was the longtime CEO of the Hearst Corporation. He had started out selling classified ads for one of the Hearst newspapers in San Antonio, Texas, rose from that to be the publisher of the San Antonio Light, and then later became a senior executive in New York with Hearst, and then a long time, in fact, a two-time CEO of the Hearst Corporation. In the book, he had a bunch of pictures of the famous people he had been with, and one of my favorites was a picture of a laughing Katharine Graham and a laughing Richard Nixon. Now, let's think about that for a minute. Katharine Graham was the publisher of the Washington Post. The Washington Post exposed Watergate. Without her exposing Watergate, Nixon would have never resigned. And yet here we were a dozen years later, and they had found common ground enough to be laughing together. I need Congress to laugh together a little bit more. I need them to collaborate a little bit more. I need them to compromise a little bit more, because the lack of compromise is leading us to another C word, and that word is catastrophe. Since we've spent all day talking about C words, here's a final couple of C words on the road with Rick. 2 words: crab cakes. Now, here's a dilemma. I live on a tidal river, and I catch crabs all the time, and I make amazing, and I mean amazing, crab cakes. So it's extremely hard for me to enjoy restaurant crab cakes, with one exception. My good friend Tom Pierce took me to a place called Charlie G's Restaurant in Lafayette, Louisiana. And here's what we ordered: a large bowl of dark roux smoked duck and andouille sausage gumbo with rice. And then they add a crab cake on top of the gumbo. This crab cake is amazing. All crab meat with very little filling, just enough to hold it all together. You dip your spoon into the crab cake and then plunge it down into the gumbo. And you eat it all up, bite after bite. And then finally, you take that amazing French bread from the Langlanais bakery and you sop up everything else in the bowl with that bread so no one even has to wash your bowl when it goes back. And then you stop and listen for the sound of angels singing. That's right, the sound of angels on the road with Rick. Thanks for being with me today, and to our terrific guest, Chappel McCollister. We'll see you again soon from the bridge.